You will have the opportunity to check if we did our homework. Last night, we had a nice meeting with a lot of people in order to come up. Well, what am I talking about? You better explain this, Marijn. It's all yours.
Thank you very much, Jan. Good morning, friends. Good morning. It's good to see that the hardcore is still here, because we have more hard work to do today. Well, did we mention that this was a working conference, Jan? I think we did, right? So what are we going to do today? Of course, we're going to share the draft of what is going to be the Naarden Declaration together. And when we look at a draft, it's always good to take some time to consume, to digest, think it over. So we're going to have one more breakout. One more breakout. And the breakout has to do with action. Two-way or maybe even one-way action. What are we going to do? But as a board of ITC, we would also like to know what our assignment is, coming from you, the members. So that's one more breakout. When you come back, there will be a panel. And the panel is the board. Questions, suggestions. Maybe we can talk about the declaration. Probably we will. And we're going to wrap up this morning with an evaluation. Just all of us together. Have one more talk. Look back. What did we like? What didn't we like? How do we see the future of the next conferences? All right, so now let's look at the Naarden Declaration. And I can tell you, I was nervous about this. Yes, April?
Can you just be really clear about the question you want the groups to address?
It's going to be very clear because it's going to be up there.
Great.
It's not in your papers yet.
Okay.
But it's up here.
Whoa.
Don't worry about it.
Whoa.
So if you look around you, then we've done a lot of work together, but we've also produced a lot of stuff, right? There's a lot in the back there, there's a lot here, and I work a lot with groups, and I can tell you it can be a nightmare to come up with a draft for anything. It usually takes days, and sometimes it takes weeks, and sometimes even longer. So yesterday we hoped to work with a very small group, but sometimes small groups become a little bit bigger. And I think because of all the good work we all did together, it was more or less easy to come up with something. The test, of course, is us. Do we recognize what's here? And I think the assignment we had last night is to look behind the words and to see what is connecting there. So here we go. Naarden Declaration, draft. Point number 1. Having respect for the different theosophical streams, we, the participants of the ITC 2014 in Naarden, will act as the beacon light for bringing Theosophy as presented by H.P. Blavatsky to the world. And through harmonious cooperation, we will strengthen the Theosophical movement for the benefit of humanity. 2. In the spirit of unity and brotherhood, we endeavor to make Theosophy a living power in the world. And 3, how we're going to do that, we commit ourselves through learning, training, and cross-pollination. Anybody has a question about that word? Yeah? Say it in Dutch. Kruisbestuiving. And Isaac, I don't know the word in Spanish, but it's what happens when bees go to different flowers. Uh-huh. No. Not that part. No estoy hablando de mariposas. I'm not talking about butterflies. When we examine what is there in all the different theosophical groups, we can learn from each other. That's what's in the word cross-pollination. To popularize and keep the teachings alive for future generations. And we're going to give you some time to chew on this. It's going to be up here later on when you come back. It's going to be up here when you will have the board on stage. So we have some time to chew on it. Maybe a couple of very quick first reactions, just first impression. Bianca? Mike, and stand up, please.
Daar is hij dan. Very clear, very simple, very Buddhic.
All right. Over here?
No, it's just right on.
Say it one more time into the mic, so everybody... Dancer, come on, let's hear it one more time.
That's what, right on.
Thank you. Anybody else? First reaction? Just a couple of words? Yes?
I am missing the word sharing.
Sharing. Good. I think we tried to put that in the word cross-pollination. And we'll...
Well, okay. Yes.
Well, let's leave it here. We'll leave it hanging in the air. We'll think about it and we'll come back. One more? Two more?
Cross-pollination is sharing with a higher result. For you can share cups of coffee and tea as well, and nothing happened. But cross-pollination is to go both to a higher level in your work and actions.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, it's already there.
I missed the masters in the text. I think the starting point from our conferences so far was that we referred to Theosophy as presented by HPB and the Masters, and I missed the Masters.
Okay, all right, thank you. Well, let's take some more time to chew on it, and let's do that in small groups. You can use the same small groups you used on both Saturday and Sunday morning if you want, with the exception of Patricia's group, because Patricia is on her way to Italy. And with the exception of Gloria's group, because she's either on her way to Honduras or she's somewhere else, but she left yesterday as well. If you want to join another group, you're welcome to do so. There's on the table in the back there's big papers. The small papers are standing next to it. There's pens. There's 2 questions, and there's a very specific assignment. Because like I told you on the first day, we would like to make a video of what happened here. And we would like to have your impressions as well. So when your group comes back, we would like to have a 1-minute presentation of every group on these 2 questions. So if you don't like to be on video, don't do it. If you say, okay, it would be nice, but we do it with 2 or 3 or with the whole group, that's fine, just work it out. If you want to draw a picture, fantastic, work it out. You want to use words, beautiful. But it's going to be part of the end video. So when you come back home and you want to share with your own environment, you have something to show, not just of the people who did the talks here, but also of the people who were actually the presenters, and that's you. Okay? Here's the 2 questions. And keep in mind that ITC is not another theosophical organization, and definitely not competing with what's already there. It's a platform for theosophical organizations and theosophists stimulating each other to spread theosophy in the world. Okay? Here's question number 1. In April, it's good to take notes if you're a facilitator, right? Yeah, great. What can ITC do to enact the Naarden Declaration? And enact is another word for, if you have a law and you put it into work, that's where we use the word enact. So to make it happen. So this is your assignment more or less for the board. What do we need to do? And question number 2, what are all of us going to do as from tomorrow to bring the declaration to life in our own theosophical environment?
Could you perhaps explain what you mean by your own theosophical environment?
Well, if you go back home, your lodge, your church, wherever you're active. Environment. I hope that catches everything. Your biotope. Any questions about the assignment?
Is there a way to get something written down that we can take to our group?
Are we going to do the whole group thing in here?
No, you can go wherever you want.
Well, if that's the case, if we're going to go in another room, should we have the Naarden Declaration written down so we can take it with us?
Well, you can write it down, but my suggestion is you take the questions. And you keep the declaration in the back of your mind, because the declaration will be back up here again to discuss further with the board later on. Let's focus on the questions first. Is that okay?
But the questions are about the Naarden Declaration.
Yes.
So they're related. So, okay.
Yep. Yep. All right. Just to make clear what we're going to do, we're going to videotape every group, let's say a minute. Let's say not a culpa, please, just a minute, okay? And the dialogue starts afterwards. So we're going to record everything. There's two reasons to do it. The first reason is that we can broadcast, so we can send it to all of you, so we get some input back. We can see what we've been talking about, what we think about that. The second reason is that the board can look at it again and again and say, okay, so what do we need to do with this? And what do we need to do with this draft to refine it? Right? Afterwards, the board's going to come on stage. They will be your audience, and we're going to ask you to present whatever ideas, questions, suggestions you have, of course, starting from the Naarden Declaration. So the first group, Betty, where's your group? Yes.
They asked me to introduce them, but Renee come up, and our whole group is going to stand in support of us. We had difficulty with the first statement of the Naarden Declaration, and so Renee is going to read how our group rewrote it in a way that we could feel comfortable with it.
Thanks, Betty. Okay. Recognizing HPB's teachings as our foundation and having respect for the diversity and freedom of the different theosophical streams. We will act as a beacon of light for bringing Theosophy to the world. Through harmonious cooperation, we will strengthen the Theosophical movement for the benefit of humanity.
Okay, and then we're going to have, Bianca, to give the statements that we came up with as far as actions.
So, for the second questions, the actions, first point we have is have periodic meetings together. And purposely we didn't say annual, because if it's more, it's no problem.
Go on.
Okay, and the second point, explore the possibility of common projects and shared resources, so that we can look for projects we can do together. Baan, for example, mentioned Theosophy for Dummies. Just an example. Network and friendship. Of course, that's something we have to do ourselves, but the ITC is a good way for it. Socializing, and we can share all emails and everything here. And the last point is stimulate shared celebration of mutual events such as the White Lotus Day. Okay, work on ourselves to be beacons of light wherever we are. Even kijken hoor. Seeking self-knowledge through service, study and meditation. Oh yeah, and if you come home, that we consider practical ways to work together to take responsibility for initiatives. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. All right. Please leave your posters on the stage. We can use them later on. And the next group is very close by.
So we wanted to use a metaphor which speaks louder than words, for what ITC has created and continue to create. And we'll do that first, and then I'll share a few of the ideas that we came up with.
Thank you. Well, it was said that the metaphor of the Inca wall, that it is still a mystery how these different stones are combined. But there has been some investigation into that. And what they probably have done is they used a small measuring instrument, and they measured exactly at each point of one stone how much they should carve from the other stone. So it's a constant process of measurement of where the other person or other stone is. So that is the process maybe in which we can join seamlessly with each other.
All right.
And we also, like yesterday, I think it was Joop who mentioned this, the vibration level of all the various blocks. We all have our own different vibration levels, and that's what strengthens the wall against the outside turmoil, the earthquake which is taking place all around us.
So a few ideas that we came up with is, maybe you could help me hold these. This one and that one. And then the other one.
Oh, the other one too?
Yeah.
Can you help, Ingmar?
So the idea, we asked questions. Our group loves questions. So everything's put in question form. Socrates, you know. So we asked about ITC, what can we do? Is it really just holding internal conferences, or are we going to go out to the world? And then we talked about what are the requirements to reach out if we decide to go out in the world? What do we need to do? And we talked about how what we need to do is share what inspires us. And that led us to the metaphor of how things fit. And then we can also, the ITC could do some research to find out how we could pool our resources from our different groups and be more effective that way. And we can reach out in line with other inner theosophical groups and perhaps set up some study groups, could be over the web. And then in terms of sharing, of course, we always have to live the life, which is what our existence is about. But we can take what we got today to our groups. We can hold other conferences that speak and listen from the heart in different languages, in different groups, and spread what we've done here. We can talk with our organizations. We can also perhaps for ourselves read and investigate new areas that we've learned about through sharing with other people that we haven't really thought of before. New authors, new theosophical authors that maybe we have pushed away. We take a look at them. So those are just a few ideas.
Thank you, guys. Who's next?
Okay, I think we had I think a very good discussion, very good thoughts about it, and well, we thought the ITC is already, and we hope to keep it, a recharging station, theosophically viewed, and another way of looking at it is really a kind of alchemical process. And I think that's something to think about. In a certain way, it is similar to the United Nations because you derive some principles and you bring it back to your own country in the United Nations and you try to enact it and giving it form like an autonomous country you are. And each time going to and fro. And I thought it was also a nice similitude. That's about the first questions, about the role of the ITC. So we do not stress something like making the ITC bigger or something like that, but it's keeping it that focal point. And the second question, what we can do ourselves. Well, I think foremost, because it lives so strong, bring the inspiration, the real, what we call the ITC mentality. The ITC mentality is looking behind the fences, and it is also bringing a spirit of real respect, with all consequences of that, to your own environment, to your own group. And that means all members of the ITC and all people here have some responsibility, I think. So we thought this is the nucleus. And all in all, we said, okay, the Naarden Declaration is really realizing our commitments. We had a few questions about the words, but the spirit was in. Yes?
All right.
Okay.
Well, Henk, as long as the spirit's there, then the words will come. What group is next? Sieglinde? All right. How's this?
Well, it fits perfectly to our to the group which was before us, I think, because we have said we have here in Naarden already created a special atmosphere of cooperation and understanding, and this should be preserved by ITC should act as a vehicle and a facilitator for the movement to share best practices and keep this momentum forward ongoing. Yeah? So that was the what ITC should do. You can please add if I did not put it right. And this responds in a way also to the second question, but we have said that it might be a help to revisit the Mahat Chohan's letter regularly to get a clearer vision of that unity we are striving for and to build it up. And so when we come together next year, we have already a broader and a deeper platform, and we can go on in this spirit. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, guys. What group is next? Oh, but you just gotta get up, because now the group Ben is already here.
We have 6 statements. The first one is, the second one is, bring to everyone the energy and fun of yesterday afternoon instead of the dull and boring theosophical teachings.
Wow.
The third one, inspire and involve people building brotherhood and soul sisterhood. Okay.
Actually, we didn't quite say that about yesterday afternoon. but we did say that it was great fun, and we did think that it inspired a different way of working, and we're very grateful to everyone in ITC for bringing that to us. So we then drew this diagram because we thought we'd get creative, and this is supposed to be the beginnings of a sacred symbol. So I don't know if you can see it, but it's a cross. Cross with equal arms in a circle, and it says horizontally across the horizontal, and then it says top down and bottom up, and we think that's a great way of working. And the circle surrounding it is yellow, and it might be a sun, but it also might be a beacon, so that's what that says. And number 5, is suggest, not impose, because we all work in our own way, a media plan to support putting it out there. Oh, and sorry, I forgot also to say that very much in 4 is a feeling of we want to hang out with these people. So that's the kind of feeling that we'd like to generate. So so back to suggest a media plan. That seems to us to be an action which is something we can bring out of this. So.
The first, ITC should stay true to its 7 principles. The answer to the first question. And to the second question, practice the respect mentioned in the Naarden Declaration into our own environment. So when we are back home, alone in our lodge, we should still be respectful to the others. We should be respectful to the others like we have been today, because it's so much more easy when they are not there to lose your respect and start complaining about them or something like that, you know, criticizing them. So that's what we should continue to do. The respect that we have brought up for each other's differences when we speak about Theosophy and other groups, to be in that spirit. Thank you.
Thank you. That was awesome, guys. The group GC.
Well, we had a bunch of soldiers in our group that just want to know what to do. So we're talking about these big ideas, and then it's, well, give me a plan. What are we going to do? So we thought that the ITC should be a platform to facilitate sharing of information and sharing about the future and collaborating. So we thought that the things that we could share for the present is that groups could get together, representatives or people with experience with different efforts could get together and share information about their activities. What are you doing? What are we doing? Our experiences, which includes our successes and our failures. We tried this, it didn't really work, but we tried that, and it was great. And then we could list, the ITC could list all the websites of the different organizations. And then in reference to the future, we could facilitate the coordination, especially to reach out to young people. That seemed like it was a really important part of our group. And it just seems that there's one level is to get together and just share. Well, what are you doing? That's important, right? But it seems like at a higher level, we could try and share the successes and the failures, and then we could begin to ask each other, well, why do you think this was successful? Why did this not work so well? What are the principles involved? And then to try to develop some principles of action about what can be successful and what is the best way to spread the teachings of HPB and her teachers for humanity. So. And also, it was mentioned that perhaps internet mediums of communication, instead of the different groups, flying in airplanes and going on, trains and so forth to get together, that it could be used. You could use Skype and GoToMeeting. I don't know if anybody knows about that. And there's these audio mediums that are used by the gamers that are free. And they don't have any money because they don't work, because they play on computer games all the time. But but they're free and they work very well. And they can house up to 1,000 people, I think, on the same audio medium. So, and then they have different rooms that you can go into and separate out and so forth for communication. So, and then as far as we can just, somebody suggested that we could take a copy minimally of the Naarden Declaration back to our lodges and branches and so forth, and just have it out there and share it with people. And also to kind of do something about when new people come to our lodges and so forth, usually they think that they've come home, they have found unity and so forth, and then they find out that there's all these other organizations. But if there could be a third step where they also find out that there's an effort to bring the organizations together and that it really is a community. Is there anything else that we talked about? Is that it? Okay.
All right, guys. Wow.
All right. Oh, it's very loud. So what we thought for the first question first was to encourage, well, that's the homework for the ITC, right? So to encourage more events which involve students from all traditions. And one way of doing that would be, we thought, a newsletter, an international newsletter that would inform all traditions about events of all traditions. And that's only one possibility. It could be another digital tool. And another one would be promote exchange of knowledge. And one of the ideas to do that, one example that we thought, was this idea of affinity groups, so international affinity groups about, for example, theosophy and media, theosophy and science, theosophy and etc. And another thing that we thought was train the trainers, meaning the teachers or the lecturers, not only about content, but also about didactics. It means not only making our lecturers and teachers knowledgeable, but also training them to allow them to present this knowledge in an engaging way and in an informative way. So that is our homework for ITC people. And then what can we do ourselves? We thought, well, the first thing is to share the declaration, the Naarden Declaration, with other theosophies that couldn't be here. And always emphasize the unity of the theosophical movements. I think it's something that is part of making the Naarden Declaration real to each one of us, but we wanted to emphasize the unity and explore the learning opportunities from other groups. And so really try to visit other lodges, visit other groups, and try to learn with each other. Is it all?
That's great.
All right.
The other way.
Okay. Before we go to the detail of the answer to the question, a quick image, like a cartoon. We all start from the core teaching, as we know. And we know who provide them, but what is important is the content. From the content, various traditions of theosophy emerge, and they grow up their own flower with their own color. And from that, it irradiates to the world. So, back to the question of the ITC. If we want, first of all, if we want to implement the Naarden Declaration, not like the Mayan wall, some wall need to crumble down. And ITC is really the door opener. And what we figure out is that we need to be careful. And we took the example of a cake. Someone is cooking a cake in the kitchen, and if he opens brutally the door, we will lose the scent. If we just open very slightly, it will go all over the room of the house. And that's the recommendation.
So actually, the beacon, as we see it, you see there, it's radiating from inside out, so that also the outside world can radiate back, so to speak. And isn't that the whole idea of Theosophy and ITC as a beacon? So what ITC is not and never should become is another school of Theosophy. We have plenty of those. It's just about getting these schools to help to be better at it. And so this cross-pollination is a very important thing to work on. And so what can we do? We can try to make an agenda of the most important things we should share about in order to become better channels for Theosophy. And from that agenda, we could start to organize cross-pollination activities, such as, for example, an internship from someone from one organization at the other organization. And the things that the group JC said is actually exactly what we had in mind as well. So what works, what doesn't work, but why does it work? Why does it not work? And what can we learn from that? So that's the answer to the first question, I think, more or less, ladies, gentlemen. It's all right. So making this plan together is very important, because whatever we do, we should always be able to have this touchstone of the vision of ITC. What we do should be in sync with that, we said. Now, what can we do ourselves as of now to bring the declaration to life from our own Theosophical movement? And we came to the conclusion that bringing it to life from our own Theosophical movement, we first have to bring it to our own philosophical surrounding. So what we have been radiating here, we should also make it a living power in ourselves. So the radiation should go on when we step out the door here. Every single one of us should be able to do that now. And then bring this to your organization. And then explain and show what the declaration is all about. And then once you have radiated the ITC ideal in your own Theosophical environment, enthuse your own Theosophical environment, this can help and can participate in setting up the agenda for the next period. And then we get back to this image again. And that makes the circle round. Yep.
Yeah, first we talked a lot of that we are now pregnant with the with this declaration, yeah, and with the new situation, and that we have to think carefully and then step forward, yeah. And our outcome was that ITC should help stimulate harmonious cooperation, communication, and interaction of each organization. Assist each organization live the life of the declaration together and in harmony, using the teachings of HPB and the masters so that we may help humanity. That's our goal. Yeah, and the second question, of course, for us, practically, to go home, tell our members of the local groups of the ITC and its declaration, and welcome and encourage their participation. And the last one, walk our talk best we can. Yeah. That's we heard often this weekend. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Isn't it awesome what can come out if we get into this dialogue together across groups, from the heart to the heart? It even smells good. Now, I've always known that Theosophists have a very different perspective of time than most people. So I promised you a 20 to 30 minute summary. It might be a little bit longer with all the awesome presentations that we just seen, but I don't think we're going to cut out too much. This was really good stuff. Now next I'm going to invite up to the stage the board. And this is going to be facilitated by Jean. And maybe a good start would be if the board would give some feedback on what they've just heard. How do we reflect on what we heard? And let's be careful with the posters here because we want to use them. Please come up to the stage, board.
Okay. Huh? No, I've got to.
Come on, guys, we can sit down.
Okay.
Do you like to stand? Yeah, that's right. I need to sit.
Where? Oh. There you go. Oh, there you go. Okay. I'm going to try to follow in the footsteps of Marino, but don't know if I can. So you said that perhaps we should spend just a few minutes with the board, having them give some ideas of what their impressions of the presentations were. So I will invite the board, maybe 2 or 3, 4 members, just to offer their thoughts, because again, the presenters have to work us over. Mike?
Yeah, I would just like to say something. I am very happy that this one group, which I think was headed by Betty Blanche, wanted to change the wording, perhaps broaden the perspective a little bit. But our group with April made it very clear that we were all in favor of having H.P. Blavatsky and her masters and the masters as being an important part of the first sentence of the Naarden Declaration, and that HPB alone perhaps didn't get across to everyone who is perhaps new to Theosophy who that was. And personally, I like the idea of freedom of diversity getting in there. So I think we can work with this language to be inclusive of what everyone needs. But I think we need to have H.P. Blavatsky and the masters in the first part of the Declaration, and then broaden it, and then move to working for the true benefit of humanity. So I'm thankful for everyone's input.
Great. Universals to particulars. Herman.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. I think the experience we had yesterday evening with a few people to make the draft was, for me, a little bit of an outview what will happen in the toekomst, in the future. Because in the first instance, we were thinking, my God, all the terms and ideas, how you press that together. And then, of course, the discussion started about freedom and so on. So we had quite some intensive talk with each other. And the good thing was that after a certain moment, we putting up some text, and then finalizing the text from the draft was maybe done in 20 minutes or so. And that was mainly because the idea was there, and we were using for the right words. Of course, we have to learn a new word, and thank you very much, Betty, for that. We enhanced our knowledge of English by that, pollination and so. So what I would like to say is, I think we will have the same process if we're going out. Because we have to realize one thing. We had a great atmosphere here. We were on a great place. So we were almost, let's say, in a reasonable, isolated condition. But now we have to go out. And now we go 1 to a few hundred people, maybe 1 to 1,000 people. And we have to fertilize the other ones. And then we should realize that we really have to deal with the cave of Plato, because we have been out of the cave, you go back to the cave. And now you have to tell the people, the shadows on the wall are not real. But last weekend I have experienced something what is much more real than what you keep here. So, and then you should be, let's say, aware for the reactions, because it can be quite tough, maybe violent, but overcome that. We know there is light outside, the sun is there, and the sun is our higher truth, and there we have to go for.
Jan.
Yes, I just would like to fill in. You know, we are a number of mainstreams. There are 3 of them. And we all use, at times, different words. And we are accustomed to those words, but the others might not be. So I think words have a limitation. Terminology has a limitation. And that is where what I called on the first day, the art of listening comes into the picture. We have to learn to step out of what we are accustomed to and understand that others are accustomed to another terminology. Because sometimes in a word we can, you know, it might all get very tricky because of a word or a phrase. And I think that is what we encountered yesterday. But then when the first struggles were over, we were actually talking about the same thing. So the art of listening, really try to put aside that what you have taken for granted for so long and start to learn again and try to understand what the other has to say. And I think that will also, bring us forward.
Thank you. And yes, April?
I just want to build on Jan's words here. And when we think about the great energy and the spirit of this conference and how good we felt, the idea is creating a process where people learn to listen to each other and learn to speak from the heart. That's not easy. It's actually easier to do it here in a way because we're all coming together for the first time and we're pretty open. We haven't been together as a total group for a long time. And the longer you're together, the more you form these patterns, and it's actually harder to change the patterns. So that's part of when you go back to your organization, it's not so easy. Okay, you're going back to your family. And think about how hard it is to work with your family. So it's hard to make these changes, but to the extent that you can really think about this process of trying to create a new openness where you speak and listen from the heart and form your programs around that, then that energy begins to build. And it isn't easy, but maybe that's one thing we could help service ITC could do more of is work on that, helping us all develop more skills in being able to create this spiritual energy that we have together.
Thank you. Let's switch attention. Now, we are on the examining table, and so we are opening the floor to you to ask any question you would like, to offer suggestions or whatever, or pry into the minds of the board members to see what some of the underlying motivation is for all of this. But I think we've heard a lot of that throughout the weekend. So, do we have any questions, any comments, any suggestions from the presenters? Yes. Do we have a mic? Yes.
I often like to...
Is it working? Mic working?
Do I have to stand? Yes. I like to think out of the box, because if you don't do it, you don't create something new.
It's working now.
It's working,
yes.
No worries, no worries. And I was triggered by a remark I think was made by Bianca. We have enough schools already, like the European School of Theosophy, to give you an example. Would it be an option to move in a direction that the schools are becoming a branch of this very effective organization, so that the schools can more easily learn from each other?
Okay, so let's, if I can rephrase that, would it be a suggestion, and this is a very important question because it's a very, how can I say, sensitive question, should the schools in essence be an outreach of ITC? And I know I have heard the response from some of the board members throughout the weekend in regards to that question, but what are we thinking? Should the schools be an extension or a part of?
Well, I think clearly an international Theosophy conferences is a beacon light, and last night it got to be very late, and we started to discuss, well, should we say the beacon light or a beacon light? And I think H.P. Blavatsky expressed it in French, la faire inconnue. Can't pronounce French very well, but she said the beacon light. But this has to include this respect and all-encompassing freedom, and that, this is what all Theosophists do together. I think international Theosophy conferences. So I don't want others to see us as pretending now to be the head of everybody, or that all those will simply be limbs in a trunk. But I think we want to see it as a great and welcoming umbrella and welcoming differences, whether the first sentence says the beacon light or a beacon light. I like the metaphor, so I'd like to know what others think.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I'd like to add also to that. I think we have it in the core of our own teaching, because, and that's what I like always very much. Well, we've all read the Mahachohan letter, starting with the doctrine being the only true one. But what is this truth? And there can only be one truth. And if we read the first proposition, we read about boundlessness. And that means that this truth, this boundlessness, that it can never be grasped by any limited being as we are. How much we are growing in consciousness, there is always something larger than, because there's boundlessness. So I think we always have to read it in that sense, and that there never can be someone telling you the truth, but at least we can depart from the truth that has been given to us by HPB in the sense of this boundlessness, this boundless principle. So, yeah, I think for me, it answers the questions. It's in our own teachings.
Okay. Herman.
Yes. I found it a very good question. And you know already that I am always trying to push for first spiritual unity, because I'm afraid of all the documents and contracts and organization structures. So I first like to look out to have a cooperation on, let's say, working together on conferences or exchange people for conferences and so on. And I think by that doing, we will learn each other much better, because our being here was a very big experience to understand this center much better, to work together with great people. So that was a very good step in our spiritual development. So from that point of view, I say, of course, the ideal will be that in the far future, there will be only one strong, really strong Theosophical organization what reads out in the world. But I think between now and then, there will be quite a number of years. So let's make a first step. So I think I will see Linda in lunchtime or so. Yeah.
Dave.
When I first came here, I thought of ITC as kind of an umbrella. You know, all the organizations are here. But after listening to you, what just came to mind, I don't know if any of you had that idea. You know, it's kind of an umbrella. We're all here together. But actually, ITC now to me is more like a flower. It's the result of all the organizations. So rather than kind of the top down, it's sort of the bottom up. ITC we wouldn't be here today if there weren't all these organizations. So I see it kind of like that all the groups have created ITC, rather than thinking that ITC is somehow should be the umbrella of all the organizations. So I just wanted to share that as maybe a little different image of thinking about ITC. Yeah.
April is waving fingers.
So I wanted to say that I teach about organizations and how they work. And, you know, in the Victorian era, the top-down hierarchy, which is in our nature, was the prominent metaphor for how to organize. And the movement is more towards open systems rather than closed systems. So part of the problem with the top-down structure is that communication often doesn't go back up. And while top-down organizations, if they can keep doing the same thing, they do it pretty consistently and pretty well. They're not very good at adapting to change. So open organizations have an ability to adapt more. And if they're actually really open, they could be hierarchical when they need to, and then more decentralized when they need to. So I think we're in an era when we're seeing in the world a movement toward more organic, open organizations that do networking, that exchange the gifts and services we have to bring to each other. So I think that we're moving more in sync with what organizationally the world needs at this moment, which is that unity and diversity, that cross-pollination that we're talking about. So what I see ITC doing is being sort of a vehicle to stimulate that network, to enrich the network that's already there. And it feels really good. You know, to me, the spiritual energy is really obvious. So I think if we keep moving in that direction and respond to the needs of what all of you would like to see us do, we can create those opportunities for that cross-pollination.
And just as a last word perhaps on the question, and it's not even an answer, but just more of an image, you know, in my own mind, I like to think of ITC as an invisible nucleus that doesn't exist. And it's only when we come together that we manifest as a sun, and we derive energy from that, and then we burst like a nova, and we take that energy back out into the world. But because everything is cyclic, we breathe and we come together and create and then share and dispense that into the world. So in a sense, if we became another solid body, we would actually defeat the purpose of what we were trying to achieve. Right. Other questions, suggestions, thoughts, offerings?
So I'd like to hear any suggestions for the board as to what you would find helpful in another ITC.
Yes.
Thank you. I think your work and what we as public did was a real blessing. I felt it as a blessing, and I'm afraid I am not alone. We all felt it like that. I had an idea. There is one side of being together is learning, and I heard so many beautiful things, but at the other side it was too fast for me, and well, in a way too much, but I can't have much enough, so it is a bit tricky. And I have an idea. When you present, the organizers present something, I thought it might be that you frame it in a way, frame it in a silence, and not just be silent, but in a way as Jan did in the beginning and for the children. He asked the silence and to put your idea to the children, and so I like that very much, and perhaps there are more people. But when we are silent before somebody is telling his story, his ideas, it comes deeper, I think, and it is not a way how much we can prepare, but the depth is also very important. And not only silent, I think music is also possible. Some more beautiful music here and there will work. But it is not a comment, it is geen...
Critique.
It's well taken. Yes, well, ik hoop dat het een bijdrage is.
Thank you, thank you. Other suggestions, comments, Joop?
Hello, yeah.
Hello.
Since the conference will be only in a year from now, the board will have a lot of time to think over the next step. So I'm trying to think about some homework. We have seen now a working conference the first time. Last conferences were all giving lectures to each other, and you have collected now a number of suggestions how we can strengthen the theosophical work by cooperating. So do you have already some ideas what kind of experiments we are going to see changing first from lectures to working conference, and how this will develop further on?
Any thoughts in terms of how we're going to manifest?
I think every conference is unique by itself. And if I just go back into my own history with ITC, as I said, we were in the mountains in Julian, and then we went to Wheaton, and then we went to New York, and now we're here. And every format in its own respect is unique. And of course, the board doesn't have much time to put it all together, you know, tomorrow or the day after. But, no, we have 2 weeks at least. But, you know, this was a unique format. But what we could think in terms of is to find a combination of the two. I think the workshops functioned excellently. But when I was talking to the people, for some of them, as Wouter said, it was a little too much. But of course, we had only a limited time, and we wanted it all to get done. So we listened very carefully to what you know, have to contribute to what we did, and we will take note of it, and we will try to find a format for a next time whereby perhaps, but of course we need to talk about it, we find a combination of the two. Because I think having lectures on a very specific subject is excellent. But I think if we're also able to get this working atmosphere, which is so typical for what we are doing, whereby again we listen to one another, I think we should also add that as an element to a future ITC gathering. Anyone else?
I think, Jan, I agree with you quite often. And Joop gives the idea that we have a whole year, but I can tell you, Joop, and you know also as well, that a year is really going fast. Special if you have 3-4 times a day Skype with Jan. And my partner say, what is going on between you two? And they say, oh, no, it is just for 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But okay, we had a quite tough communication, nicely communication. But what I like to say is, and that is, I think, what I have learned from here, that the working aspect of this conference is a very important one. Because listening in your chair to a teaching is one, but the working groups have really shown us that if you have to speak with each other and what can you do with it is really an additional, very important level. And if we have not that type of ideas clear, we are not able to bring out Theosophy. So I think that's for me a must. Maybe it is not needed to do it in the way as we have done. Maybe we have to do it more in, let's say, helping each other to bringing out Theosophy. But I think workshops, and especially the World Cafe, I must say, I found it quite intense. But luckily, by the last one, we had a break and I can take a coffee. But it is quite intense. But I must say, you really squeeze out something good. So for me, and the board is not yet have made a decision, but for me, it should be really in on one way or the other way. Yep.
Garrett, yes.
Well, it looks like, are we on? Looks like we share the same perspective. We have had mostly lectures, presentations in past conferences, and that's a fairly easy thing to plan. It's rather spontaneous. Sometimes the lectures weren't really connected that well to the theme, and we've become a little less spontaneous and unpredictable. We've become much more planned, especially this year. And I think the best lesson is that no matter what the overall structure of the conference is, there has to be encouragement for people to meet together and get to know each other, to speak personally and from the heart. So I think this is going to be a permanent part of our conferences, that it may be a lot of lectures, but there's always going to be a good portion of it where people really can share one-to-one or in a small group. And I know we have concerns that sometimes it goes fast, but believe me, this conference has allowed so much more time between the different programs and for the coffee breaks. And I see people networking, getting to know each other, and that's so beautiful. So I think we all agree that we will keep that part at least as an aspect of future conferences. So we appreciate your feedback on that. We have evolved, and the other thing I should say is that usually each conference has a theme and also has a sponsor, and the host makes a lot of the decisions about exactly how it's filled out. And as the board becomes closer together and more experienced, the board will take more leadership in that area, so it will be more consistent and hopefully even a better product.
Marino, next door.
I have a mic, I think. Is it on? Can you hear me? For me, this conference was different from the perspective that we started with an objective instead of a theme. So if you have a theme, you invite speakers to prepare presentations around the theme. In this case, we had an objective, and the objective, well, you've seen the objectives on the wall, right? And I think for me it should be, so we need to discuss with the board a lot, I think. We need to start with the objective. So if we have a next meeting together, what is that we want to get out of it? And like Rafael put it, we have homework to do. So we need to figure out, we want to work together, what are the objectives? In what directions do we want to work together? And if we figure that out, then we have to look at the format. So for me, that's one thing that comes out of what you've been giving us in terms of feedback, and what you've been giving us in terms of input. And I think it's also the reason why the energy is here. Because we like to work together towards something. Not just consume something, but to work together to achieve something, to accomplish something that's bigger than ourselves. So for me, that's the next step I'd like to go to.
Oh, okay, Judy first.
Yes, excuse me, I think I'm losing my voice. I just want to say that I thought the working nature of this conference was wonderful, and the interaction of the individual group I was in, and then the what we call a Salmagundi party in the cafe was just great to interact with different people. But I thought it was very important that we did also at first focus on theosophical ideas, religion, philosophy, and science. After all, Theosophy is presented in Isis Unveiled as a synthesis of religion. I think she also uses theology in that book and science. And I would really like to compliment all the speakers who really concisely, briefly, with excellent elocution, perhaps not in their native language in some cases, really presented the main ideas we needed to consider in religion, philosophy, and science. And I thought that really gave us areas of focus as well as the consideration of unity and helping the world. Where do we go from here? So now we need to talk about where we go on. And I do think the mixture of some presenters who are on point on Theosophy. I mean, in New York, we had some great speakers, but they were perhaps a little bit peripheral to Theosophy. They hadn't not been committed members. They had a lot to say. But I think here everyone has a strong commitment, and I can feel that, and it's so very important. So thank you all.
And at least for myself, you know, sometimes, since I like to stir up trouble, I'm just often a little devil sometimes. But, you know, I think the issue of evolution is important, and we are evolving, but the mixture of the conference, I often think of I think it's Muhammad Letter 6, and the mandate there was to have a power in Theosophy such that it attracts the attention of the highest minds. That doesn't mean intellectually, but just the highest minds from a soul perspective. And so sometimes the conferences should involve the gathering, the mingling, so that the boundaries that don't exist should not be seen. And that was experienced by someone mentioning, oh, I didn't know who I was working with, but we were working together as souls, co-workers in the gold for humanity. And so sometimes there will be the mixing, sometimes there will be the reinforcement of the pure teachings of Theosophy to the best of our ability, and then sometimes there will be the problem solving, which was what this was. This was a huge problem solving session. Not that there is an absolute answer, because we apply, we see what the results are, then we adjust. But it's got to be a combination of all of that, and in that way we understand ourselves and we get to understand the needs of the world that we represent, and then apply the same things out in the world so that we can attract the attention of the highest minds and the highest souls to help move the work forward.
Maybe I was confused here, but I also thought that was actually the question we're going to ask you, the question that Joop asked. So, what are the ideas? Should we do a working conference? Should we do a mix? Should we do a combination? What are the ideas?
Hi. I think out of necessity, we had to have an objective this year. Because as an organization, it's young. But I think also to keep our pulse on the outside world, because a lot of us are teachers, you know, in different degrees. We come together to share ideas. So perhaps in the future also having, you know, some kind of a theme that keeps us on the pulse of what's connecting us to the outside world. Otherwise, we become too insular. I mean, we had to do this time because it was the next logical step. But I also think we need a way to keep a pulse on what's going on at all times with the outside world. So a little theme might eventually become a necessity.
Thank you. Other thoughts? Yes. Baron?
I totally agree with that. I was thinking the next step, we all agree with each other now, is how can we bring Theosophy better in the world than we do now? Well, I'm still concerned about those millions who don't know anything about Theosophy. So I think it would be a good lesson for us in the next ITC to study on how bringing Theosophy better. And we can exchange ideas. Maybe we can open the doors more for the public because we are now just addressing Theosophists. I would have liked that there were also non-Theosophists here so they could learn something about our beautiful teachings. So that's my thoughts. I don't know, really have the answer, but how can we bring better Theosophy in the world? How can we spread our teachings? How can we, you know, really give some force to the world to better the world?
Thank you. And actually, if there's intercommunication amongst us during that year, that's something that we can share and bring to a conference.
I would like to thank Jan for inviting me to this meeting. I appreciate it very much. And I could feel real brotherhood between all the participants, genuine brotherhood. This is one of the important bases. And I can feel ITC as a movement of the heart. We want to be united because union is good. Where you have union, you have more energy concentrated. Where you have division, the energy loses. Then it's very important that the heart comes and not only the intellectual differences prevails, but I'm giving just a suggestion to go further, because until now is very, very, very well, very, very, very good. But we need really go profound in some intellectual points that we need to comprehend more. Then my suggestion is in another time, I don't know when, ITC can profound discussion about freedom of thought. Thank you.
Thank you. We've got about 3 minutes, so short, concise, and lean.
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus. I twisted your arm. I think both your arms, you know. But anyway, it's a good remark. And just let me just say that this is work in progress. You know, we are working, we are developing. And I think it was, I'll just give you one idea. Vic Hao Chin, whom you all know, most of us know him, who was very sorry that he couldn't come, he came up with a suggestion. He said, you know, why don't we get, you know, just to talk about that intellectual part, that's where we have the differences in terminology and descriptions, the freedom of thought idea, etc. So he suggested, why don't we get some scholars together from the various movements and put them together, give them a year to work out a paper where they talk about these differences, they make comparisons, and see if something comes out of that. And I thought that was a very good suggestion of Vic. He's very creative, as you know, so that could be a step forward in order to bring also the other things together. And another suggestion that came up to us today is that, you know, also the various groups could come together on a place, and I think Herman, you and I also spoke about it, to specifically talk about these differences that are there, to break it open so that we can talk about these things really to the letter.
I personally think that if we are not able to talk about our differences, we are not coming very far in cooperation. We have to learn each other, we have to understand situations from each other. So by doing that, we can go along much better.
Okay, and so I think our time is up, but just to piggyback on that note, there's the illusion that we get caught in and that we fight over, but I think what the majority of individuals, if not all of individuals, have experienced today and throughout the conference is that there is a unity, there is a core teaching, and in our hearts as well as in our minds, which is not really distinct, there is a union, and we agree on that. The question is, in its expression, as it comes through our personalities, do we agree? So, on that note, hopefully we can dissolve structures that don't exist so that we can move on. One last statement. Jim? Yes. Couldn't say no.
I just wanted to say that one of the things I've been most impressed with is the happiness of all the people that are working for this conference. The volunteers, and they each talk about how happy they are to be a part of this and how much it means to their lives. There's something going on here that has to do with the approach taken, and I wish there was some way to bring that forward to the next conference, because people say, I'm so happy to volunteer here without being paid. It's so wonderful. I don't know if anybody else has noticed that, but almost everybody in the whole staff, and how thrilling and exciting that is. So I wish we could carry that forward somewhere.
So hopefully we can hold on to the love of work. Thank you all, and we'll move it on. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Oh.
I don't want to say the last word, but almost. I'd like to thank all the people to cooperate on this. It was exciting, it was lovely. I think we have making good step forward, but we will, I think, needed many more steps. I'd like especially to thank all my co-workers who are here and have worked so happily. I'd like to thank Arend with his staff, and many months ago I was coming here for the first time to have a talk with him, and from then on there starts a very nice and open cooperation. So we were very happy by that. I think we were also very successful. So thank you very much, all the people from ITC, the Zenderen.
Just a few words. I was just checking my computer and I found an old note. Almost to the date, 17 years ago, just before I left for Brazil, I had a meeting here in the Besant Hall. And that meeting was presided by someone whom many of you know, particularly in the area circles, Paul Zwollo. And Paul spoke about the Mahatma letters. Paul and I had a special tie. He was totally different from me. I remember at one time when he had a problem in ADR, he said, Jan, would you please solve it because you are so good at that. And if I had a problem, and I had many problems not understanding the Mahatma letters, I would ask him, Paul, would you please explain to me what this means? And he said, okay. And then he would explain to me that thing. Paul is no longer with us, but he is here. He's very much here. And what I want to share with you is that there is something that binds us, that brings us all together. The path that lies before us is not such an easy one. We have to do a lot of talking. But as I said previously, we also need to do a lot of listening in particular. For me, just to think of that meeting 17 years ago before I went on that long journey to Brazil and other parts of the world just struck me. We don't get over sentimental. We did our homework. We presented you with a good conference, and we will do our utmost. You have my word to continue this work. But what is the most important thing, I just put it in very simple words. This meeting, this gathering, all that energy wouldn't have been possible without you. You were the meeting, you were that energy, and I hope that we are able to bring all that back in a meeting to come. It was an honor to be your host. I gave you a few Dutch lessons. I think you have to work on it, actually. And I want to thank you. And we have applauded a lot, but this time let's do it the other way. And if you have the possibility, any of you, no matter what organization you belong to, see if you can make it there. It's wonderful. And Jean, where are you? You were there, right? Okay, so it's really worth it. So let's do it like this. Thank you so much for being here. You were wonderful.